Hi, everyone. It's Kellyanne and Kim back with you for episode 4. I can't believe we're on episode 4 already of Raw and Unscripted. And I am coming to you today from Florida. And
I am not.
Maybe someday we can both come from Florida. You can come here to my place and we'll go live from here.
I would love that.
But today we are talking about, this is probably going to be our most challenging so far, conversation about trauma. And it's a conversation that actually Kim and I have gone back and forth on quite a bit this week. So we're not exactly sure how it's going to evolve, but we are excited to have you with us as we start this conversation.
Perfect, Kellyanne. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. If I see some of you are already here with us live, and that makes us really happy because it shows that you're like, it's Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. We got to jump on Facebook to tune into Kellyanne and Kim's show. We're so glad you're here. So as Kellyanne said, we're going to begin this conversation from our own perspectives. We will say something that is very obvious, but we're going to say it. We are not experts on any of the topics that we talk about on Raw and Unscripted, but what we do have is our own personal experiences, which hold value, as does yours. And what we also have is what we've read, what we've learned about, things that we've had to participate in to help us get where we are. And our whole purpose of Raw and Unscripted is to help you, I'll use language that you may or may not understand, become more whole, feel more safe within yourself, help to better yourself, help to move your life forward with more intention. This is the purpose. We're having conversations that we think are really, really important, that we know are important. So let's get ourselves started. Now we decided, well, how are we going to start this conversation today? And I will start by saying that since the beginning of September, I have been in a book study with incredible women reading and studying this book. I don't know if it's backwards on your end, but it is The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. If you are familiar with Gabor Mate, his work on trauma, he is an expert in trauma. I have loved his work, love his work, and his son Daniel, and they have written this book together. And I have been, again, it's a big one, you can see, and I'm just a little bit left to go. And it is a book that speaks about so many things where trauma shows up in our lives, how it manifests in our bodies. And so when we were talking about this show today, Kellyanne and I were talking about like a title and what can we talk about? We have our own experiences, and we're going to talk about some of that. But then I also want to highlight that when we have experienced challenges in our life, tragic events in our life, it does change us, and we can't ignore that. But maybe you are listening to this right now and you don't understand that. You are at the beginning potentially of your own journey of exploring, and that is why you're here. And we applaud you for that, so that you can start to understand yourself a little bit more. Because when we can understand ourselves more and have curiosity around why we might be acting a certain way, behaving a certain way, we can then have, I guess, take a gentler approach with ourselves and start to ask ourselves questions. Because I find, Kellyanne, I don't know about you, but I just know and believe that we have far too much judgment, critical judgment of ourselves. We have far too much judgment and criticism towards other people. Mm-hmm. And I want our world to be kinder. I want our world to have more understanding, more patience. And I know there's complexity around these topics, but I think that if we all can start to learn a little bit more and understand, just like we have, I hope that we have when it comes to racism, Black Lives Matter, like we take ourselves and we learn, Indigenous communities, we learn, the same thing goes here. So Kellyanne, and thank you. If you're tuning in live, let's start by typing in the chat. Let us know that you're here. Say hello so we know who tuned in. Let us know where you're here from. And again, if you would like to share this episode with your online communities, we do appreciate it. And Kellyanne, I'm going to pass it over to you now to start this conversation and take it a little bit further as we start to uncover it.
Okay, thanks, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
I love all the things that you said. And I think that trauma is, and for those of you who maybe haven't listened to the show about where I shared my journey, childhood trauma is very much a part of my story. And I was sexually abused by my parish priest as a 9-year-old little girl. And for years and years, I didn't have an understanding of that. I didn't have an understanding of how I showed up in the world. All I kept asking myself was, what is wrong with me? That was, why am I so angry? Why do I put up these walls of defensiveness? Why do I fight with people? And all of that, and you talk about compassion, Kim, and really I had very little compassion for myself because I was always critical of myself because of all these things. What is wrong with me? And I learned through a lot of study, and I learned that I had to change the question. Because once I started asking myself the question, instead of what is wrong with me, I started asking the question, what happened to me? So what happened to me that changed me? And once I started to dive into that and really get curious about what had happened, and for me, that was a trauma, childhood trauma, and how had that impacted me? And I became much more compassionate to myself because I then realized it wasn't my fault, but it definitely was my responsibility to try and change or to become, to learn how to not let that trauma control the person who I was. So for me anyways, when I was able to understand why I was doing the things that I was doing, why I was showing up in the world the way I was, and these were things that I didn't like about myself. These were ways that were not serving me. When I started to look at those things and realize that they had come from this trauma, that's where I started to be able to heal them. Because I realized that there were reasons I had these strategies that I was using had been very useful to me through that trauma. And now they were serving me then, but they weren't serving me now. So when I look at those things now and I say to myself, there was a reason for those. They served me for what I had to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so I can accept that about myself, but they don't serve me anymore. Mm. So how can I evolve so that I can leave those behind and release them?
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to just pull a couple little pieces out that I think are really key that Kellyanne just said, because you're very far along. And I don't know what age would you say you were able to come to the point of asking yourself those questions and recognizing that the coping skills, the ways that you were behaving were there to support you? What age was that at?
Probably just around 50.
Yes, let's just notice that. Let's just notice that, okay?
So, and I'm 56 now.
Yeah.
So this has been definitely an evolution that has taken a great deal of time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that, and I want to share with you that I have been reading this book, What Happened to You by Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And one of the, I have done a lot of healing. And one of the things that is really talked about in this book that I love is that the healing comes through your connections,
Mm,
through your relationships. It comes from having people in your life that help you to process the trauma over time. So this has not been, and I don't think, Kim, and you can speak to this too. Healing doesn't, you never get to the point of healing. It is not a point in time.
mhm,
It is a journey.
mhm. And we literally were just saying that. I'll just take literally a second here to read this to you. This is from the chapter 25 in the book that says, "And what is healing anyways? When I speak of healing, I'm referring to nothing more than a natural movement towards wholeness. Notice that I do not define it as an end state of being completely whole or enlightened. It's a direction, not a destination, a line on a map, and not a dot." And I feel like that's really important for us to hear that, because we can again still, we can be critical and say, why am I not over this yet? This
Mhm.
happened in the past. This happened when I was a child. Why is this still a part of my life? Because that is the natural course that it takes, because it changes us. And the more you can be understanding to know that it is an ongoing journey, and that if you find yourself, you've probably heard the word triggered. I like the word activated. If you find yourself feeling something and you're like, why? There's still healing there. Not just, there is still healing in there. There's still a piece of you that is vulnerable to whatever it is that you experienced, or something that was said, or something that you noticed in your environment. And it happens really, really quickly. But with healing and taking the time, when you have a stimulus, I'll talk a little bit of language here now. You have something that happens, a stimulus, something that triggered you. Okay. The more time that can elapse between the trigger and your response, when you can have some space between those two and be able to then respond in a way that feels more aligned with you, the direction that you want to move your life, you know that there's healing that's happening. The less time you spend in self-loathing, the less time you spend in belittlement, judgment, victimhood, you know the healing's happening. So it takes time. And we're wanting you to understand that where you are is beautiful. But as Kellyanne said, and this is also something I wanted to pull out from what she said, whatever coping skill, behavior change, personality trait, whatever it is that you adopted as a way of protecting yourself, because many of our experiences, especially if they happen to us as a child, we don't know how, we don't understand them, right? We're children, we're not supposed to understand them. So we find, like, obviously, again, I'll pull it back to the work that I do. A lot of the people that I work with find support through food. When we've had something that's happened to us, but then it actually happens inside our body. There was a beautiful analogy in the book that when let's say, here's the example he used. If we have a car accident, we sustain an injury. The injury is the concussion. Okay. So the injury itself was the accident, like the incident was the accident, right? But it's the concussion and the injury that happens inside of us, the aftermath of it. So it happens inside of us, it changes. And there's so much information in this book, Kellyanne, and everyone that's listening, that speaks to how our experiences do have an impact on our health. If we look at the mental health challenges in our world, the coping strategies that people have with addiction, they are all, we often think that a person with an addiction is a weak person. That person has actually picked up a coping skill, a way of keeping themselves safe from what's happening inside of them. And we can understand that. But then, as she said, Kellyanne just said, like, our role here then is to be able to then meet ourselves and say, but this isn't working for me anymore. I know that I'm deserving of more in my life. And to then begin that journey with people in courses, reading books, finding spaces, to begin that with people that will hold you and keep you safe and help you work through this at the pace that you can, because there is no one person that's going to do it. Like, we're all going to do it differently. And Kellyanne's experiences, and maybe we'll touch on this, I'll let you take this in a second, was a big T trauma. My experiences with trauma are little t traumas. Okay, so I spoke a tiny bit about my relationship with my father. So sometimes when we're children, we're not having some of our needs met. The things that we need as a child to feel safe, to be loved, to feel connected, to feel nurtured. And so and that's just one of my experiences. Okay. I actually learned that, dieting as a child, 11, 12 years old, is trauma. Parents that put their children on diets at young ages, this is a trauma. Kellyanne, can you speak a little bit about the difference between little t and big T?
Yeah, thanks for kind of explaining a little bit about that, Kim. And so I think that's where I would say that almost everyone has experienced trauma, because we think of trauma as these big T traumas, these capital T, like, abuse, rape, accident, natural disasters. We think of those as trauma. Those are capital T traumas. But when you look at small T traumas, how they can be described is little microaggressions over time. So they can be things like being bullied at school. They can be, they are little things, as Kim said, like not having your needs met, being told that you're too much as a child, being told that you, need to be quiet. Anything that makes you feel marginalized, unworthy, minimized. All of those things create a stress response in you. Mm-hmm. And that stress response is actually a trauma. Mm-hmm. So those are small T traumas. If you have, the research is showing that if you have a number of those consistent small T traumas, so if you are bullied in school, if you are, whatever it is in your family, if you're made to feel like you were a mistake, like there's so many things that can happen in families, patterns, and that can happen in families, that those small T traumas build upon each other. And they end up having the same effect on us as the capital T traumas. So it all has to do with that stress response, because you can imagine when you are in a stress response, if you are bullied at school, for example, let's use that one, and every day you go to school, you are stressed, you are on high alert, because you know something is coming. And there are many children who go through that in their daily lives. There are many people that go through that, whether it's in your job, you have a boss that is a bully, you have a spouse that, that makes you feel unworthy every day, whatever it is, but we develop this stress response, and that actually changes our brain. Yeah. Kim, when you talked about this is happening in our body too, like our body holds on to these traumas, and our brain physically changes. The neural pathways change because we are in this heightened stress response. I love and I have somebody close to me who has gone through trauma therapy. And he shared with me this idea of his therapist told him about a deer. When a deer is out in the wild and is chased by a mountain lion, it obviously runs, and that is a traumatic event because it's running for its life. It runs to escape death.
Mhm.
But when that deer gets to a safe place, a place where it knows it's safe, it does a shake. It shakes off the trauma to release it, to let it go, so that that deer can continue to function the way it had before. We don't have that. We don't do that. We often just experience the trauma and then we have no way to release it. And it is held in our bodies in so many ways. And that's, for me, that's been a new layer of healing in my trauma. I didn't know that the trauma was held in my body.
Mhm.
And then when I started working with somebody who helped me release it, I was amazed at how much I had held on to.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and I mean, I relate to this. I've talked about this in our home before with our dog, Sophie. Sophie, my dog is blind. And so she bangs into things a lot and sometimes quite hard. And she does it. She does a natural shake naturally. Right. And so as much as we don't naturally shake without thinking, we can do that. That's actually a really wonderful tool. And if you were to do any research on anxiety and when you're experiencing something, shaking moves energy. It's energy. We're moving it through the body. So that's probably another episode in itself that we can talk about. But the whole purpose of today is to start helping you understand that there is nothing wrong with you. Okay. Take this, like if you do anything with today's episode, we want you to be able to find a safe place, okay? Because we realize we have no idea who's listening to this right now. So first of all, if you don't feel like you can do this by yourself or begin this by yourself, then don't, and go get help, right? Go find a therapist. This is the most beautiful, courageous, bravest thing you'll ever do, is to be able to start this journey with yourself. But if you can start it by yourself, get yourself a warm blanket, pour yourself a cup of tea, whatever it is that's going to help you feel safe, curl up with your animal. And whether you take it to a journal, whether you sit with yourself, start to just reflect. Because so many of the things that we think are just normal, they're not. Hitting, slapping, what's the word I'm looking for? Spanking children. This has been formed now as a form of abuse. Is it still happening in homes? Sadly, it is. But think back, like I can remember, I was spanked. I don't know, were you spanked, Kellyanne?
Yeah, I was initially, like when I was really young, not much, not often.
Yeah, same with me. It was what we considered to be normal.
Yeah.
How many parents are also still under the belief system having their toddler cry it out in their crib? Oh, she's just looking for attention. Just ignore her or him. Like, start to just think about some of that. And you might not even, I guess this is the other thing I want to say, is you might not even necessarily go, well, I don't really think there's something different. I know that I'm very vulnerable at times. I know for me, a lot of mine is around worthiness. And I know that this goes back to love that I needed, love that I didn't know how to receive, abandonment, like feeling alone. But just start to look at some of your patterns. You don't have to. Here's the thing. You don't need to know what happened to you. You don't have to know that. Not a lot of this is all in our subconscious mind, which we'll be talking about next week. This is all our minds remember, our bodies remember. Another one of Gaber's book is The Body Keeps the Score. Our bodies remember. But what we do have is all 7 of you here with us right now. We are so thankful for you being here. We are here right now together in this moment to be able to say, I want more for me. I know that I'm worthy of more. I know that I'm worthy of loving myself, forgiving myself. I know that I'm wanting to give love to other people and maybe take some of those walls down, some of those protections that we've put up around ourselves so that we can allow love in. And it starts by allowing this journey to unfold for you, recognizing that trauma is a wound. Its Greek origin is wound. a wound in our bodies. And one thing that I also want to say, because we haven't touched on this today, as we start to wrap this up, is that there's no room for comparison in trauma.
I was just going to say that, Kim.
We were on the same path to end this today. There is no room for comparison in trauma. Well, when we were just talking a little bit about that beforehand, right? Mm-hmm. One person's trauma. And isn't this crazy that in this world we're comparing our trauma and like, well, your trauma, I don't want to use the word better. It's not the word I'm looking for, but you have more, you're allowed to be experiencing what you're feeling because your trauma was bigger than mine.
And I've had many people say to me, well, what happened to me wasn't as bad as what's happened to you. The reality is pain is pain. Mm-hmm. And who you were before the trauma definitely impacts how the trauma is going to affect you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So a trauma that could have a huge effect on one person might not have as big an effect on somebody else. So whatever it is, whatever the trauma is that you have experienced, don't ever say to yourself, well, it wasn't bad enough. I shouldn't be feeling this. Because pain is pain.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So important. I'm just reading some comments. I might be wrong. Maybe The Body Keeps the Score is not Gabber. It's possible. Maybe I just gave credit to Gabber and it's not Gabber's book. I thought it was.
I don't know. I don't think it is.
Okay, so I'm wrong. I take that back.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to be coming into the comments afterwards to see what you've shared. And the other thing I want to highlight is that by having this conversation with us right now, I hope that we can all of us extend space to someone in life that we approach, a person who is, home, like a person who is claiming to be homeless on the street, who people will judge. That person is just going to take that money and go get alcohol. We have a lot of judgment around those things. And I want us just to all do our best to pause as best as we can before we react, before we pass judgment, and maybe offer a smile, offer a look, create eye contact with someone. If we see a mother or a father or a caregiver losing patience in a grocery store with a child and maybe not responding to that child the way you think that they should, see if there's a place that you can help there. Or maybe you can, I've done this many times, is, try and smile at the child who's losing a fit in the shopping cart, just to try and help a little bit. We all have great ways to do that.
Because you're right, Kim, we have no idea what somebody is walking through. We have no idea what people's stories are. And so if we can learn to be compassionate to ourselves first, I think then that compassion naturally flows to other people. That's been my experience anyways.
Yeah. Love is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It feels great to receive it. It feels great to give it. We underestimate its power.
Yeah.
So next week.
Okay.
Next week on our next episode, we are going to go into the uncovering a little bit of what limiting beliefs are. See, a lot of these words we hear them out. That's a limiting belief. That's a limiting belief. What is a limiting belief? So we're going to start to talk about that a little bit and start to move all of ourselves forward. We thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, ask questions in the comments underneath this, whether you're watching this on our YouTube channel or on Facebook. Ask questions, privately or not, whatever you feel comfortable with. If there's things that you want Kellyanne and I to explore in this podcast, reach out to us too with that. We're here to do that. And we thank you so much for tuning in and walking this journey with us.
Yeah. And if you want to, both Kim and I, we do this work. If you want to reach out to either Kim or I to explore how we can help you, please feel free to do that too. So, but we so appreciate you being here watching. This was the dream of this show, and it's so exciting to see it actually happening.
Absolutely. I agree. All right, everyone, be kind to yourselves. Have a wonderful day, and we will catch up with you next time. Take care.
Next time.